We're going to move it around. Again, we are live all night talking Panthers and the NFL Draft on both WCNC Plus and WFMY Plus out of Greensboro. That's where my man Jaelen Gilkey is hanging out tonight. Jaelen, man, you saw all these games for the Panthers just like I did last year, and there was only one thing that everybody's thinking about tonight, and that's defense. I'll start with that. Do you think defense is the way Dan Morgan drafts tonight?
Well, Nick, I think that's without a question. I do believe tonight's pick needs to be on defense. I know Carolina right now has 9 picks for this draft. I think about 6 to 7 of those should be focused on the defensive side of the ball, just because last year there was such a drop-off in the production on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they couldn't stop anybody. The offense started to come alive the second half of the year once Bryce Young was reinserted into that starting spot at quarterback. But then we get to a lot of games where it's late third quarter, early fourth quarter, and you look up and the Panthers have given up 30, 35, 38, 41, 45 points. You can't win football games like that in NFL, no matter how many you can score. You can have the #1 scoring offense in the league, but if you give up 35 a night, you're still going to end up with a losing record. So I think defense is absolutely priority #1 for GM Dan Morgan here, and he's got a lot of picks to play with, and hopefully, like Julian mentioned, we could fill out some of those crucial depth positions at the linebacker, the defensive line, as well in the secondary.
All right, Jaelen, you heard Julian say his instinct is maybe defensive tackle today. I think because we're all a little surprised, at this point that it looks like not only Jalen Walker but Mason Graham could be available at 8. So I'm going to ask you to put your Dan Morgan hat on. If it's Graham or Walker, who would you want to see the Panthers pick tonight?
Well, I think I would have to go with Walker just because he's got a little bit more versatility from my perspective, from what I've seen. I know that linebacker level is a little bit shaky right now. I know for years, we had the core linebackers. We had Shaq Thompson, we had Kuechly, we had Thomas Davis. Those guys are gone, and now we're looking for that next wave of who's going to be the anchor, who's going to be holding down the middle, calling the plays, commanding the huddles, going where that green dot for the Carolina Panthers. And I think Walker has the potential to be that type of player, impact behind the line of scrimmage, whether that be in coverage, stopping the run. I think Jalen Walker's versatility and his ability to just find the ball is something that if he's there at 8, you got to jump on.
Yeah, right. I mean, we've heard the Frankie Louvu comps. Louvu was undrafted, but if you can get a guy like that and he's there sitting there for you, and I think Jaelen, and Panthers fans too up there in Greensboro, like this is a kid that mentioned the names you just mentioned at the NFL Combine. Like that brings an extra layer to it, doesn't it? Don't you think Panthers fans are going to like that?
Absolutely. When you grew up, 40 minutes away from Bank of America Stadium and idolized and looked up and aspired to be those guys and those names that we mentioned, and now you have the opportunity, or the franchise has the opportunity to assert yourself or put you in that next person in that line of greats. I mean, not only I feel like will that inspire Jalen Walker to put together the best career possible or his best foot forward, I just think it's just a whole nother level of not pressure, but motivation that a kid would need when you get your name called, and now all your dreams have come true and everything you've worked your entire life is right in front of you. Some guys, they choose to lay down because those checks start to come in, but when you have aspirations to be great and to be like your heroes and have that opportunity to wear those same jerseys that they wore, I think it adds that extra layer that would possibly take Jalen Walker's career to the stratosphere.
Yeah, well said. Okay, not only did you see this defense for 17 games, but you saw the roller coaster that was Bryce Young's second season in the NFL, from being benched after week 2 to storming back and asserting himself as the guy in Carolina. But he still needs help, right? Like, how do you think Dan Morgan approaches adding more help for Bryce Young in this draft?
And I know it's going to be tough because from my opinion right now, the 2 biggest areas of need for the Carolina Panthers are probably another tackle, whether that be because Taylor Moton's getting ready to hang it up or whether you're not sure if Ickey's going to be your guy at left tackle. But I think someone who has that versatility and the ability to fill in and maybe be a swing guy, he could play maybe a little guard this first year, can kick out the tackle when someone inevitably goes down just because of the nature of the game of football. I think that's probably priority #1 offensively, but it's going to be tough where the Panthers are picking in this draft to maybe find that guy. You never know what you could find in round 2 or 3. But then also, I would say, I know we went wide receiver with the first pick of the draft last year as well, but I don't think the franchise is sold or the fans are sold on Xavier Legette and what his production is at this point, what his role is going to look like. Adam Thielen is got to be on his last leg, even though the last 2 years he's been with Carolina. He's continued to show that he can be a guy that makes a major impact. He actually helped me win a fantasy football championship this year. So shout out to Adam Thielen and all his production and work. But I think a wide receiver is another spot that you gotta have more options for Bryce Young. You know, him being a smaller framed quarterback, someone who's about, you know, whose game is about timing and accuracy. You got to get somebody who can get open quickly, or if you're not open, someone that you trust to go get that ball, and that, you know, those options are out there as well on the board.
All right, Jaelen, for the first time in a long time in Carolina, quarterback's not even a discussion when we're entering this 3-day stretch of the NFL draft. You know, maybe Bryce Young will win you a fantasy championship someday. I know he wasn't really doing that last year, but do you think he asserted himself? I mean, you watched every one of his games. Do you think he asserted himself enough last year as like the guy, or does he still need to go out and prove it again this year? And remember, this is a coach that was basically like, come on, you got to prove it to me. Like every week, is Bryce back in? We'll see. Finally, at the end, he was. But kind of what's your read on that? Because I think like if you would ask me right after that Atlanta game, I'd have been like, yeah, absolutely. But a couple months to process it. How are you feeling about that?
Well, you know, the NFL stands for not for long, right? So you got to prove it every day you step out on the field. Now, I would say that I do believe Bryce Young is the future quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. His talent is undeniable, and he showed that those last 8 weeks of the season. He produced at that level that we anticipated him to produce at being that number 1 pick, and he showed exactly why he was the Heisman Trophy winner during his time at Alabama. However, you can't just live off the past and what you've done in the NFL. It's what you will do and are doing at this time. So I'm looking for a big year from Bryce Young, but I'm looking for an even bigger year starting right now in the NFL draft from the front office to help bolster and support him, to be able to put him in a position to where he can be that guy that we're looking for, as long as he is surrounded by the guys that can make plays. Because again, football is the ultimate team game. There's not one player in the league, doesn't matter how marvelous you are, whether it be Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, none of those guys won the Super Bowl this year, and that's because they weren't the best team. None of those guys were on the best team. You know, the best team was the Philadelphia Eagles, and they showed that all throughout the season, throughout the playoffs, into the Super Bowl. They might not have the best quarterback in the league, but with spots 2 through 22, I'll tell you what, there's not a team that could match up with them at that point in the Super Bowl last year, and that's where the Carolina Panthers need to be. They need to start filling out spots 2 through 22 when it comes to the starters, because without those guys, it doesn't matter how great Bryce Young plays. If he's got pressure in his face, no one's getting open, it's going to look a lot like his rookie year did.
Yeah, and the draft is going to go a long way into doing that. So I'm just going to ask you this, like off the cuff, like what would shock you tonight? Like what would shock you if the Panthers went out and did what tonight with that 8th pick?
What would shock me tonight is if the Panthers stayed in the 8th spot and Jaelen Walker was off the board. That's what would shock me, because that means they would have to most likely be looking at D tackle or possibly Ted McMillan, depending on if he's available. He's a dynamic playmaker out of Arizona. So that's what would shock me. If Jaelen Walker is off the board by 8, if Carolina stays in that 8th spot, I would be flabbergasted to see who they selected at that point.
All right, Jaelen Gilkey, well done, sir. And we're going to check in with your colleague, Logan Campbell, who's at Jaelen Walker's draft party in Salisbury, North Carolina tonight. What a story that would be for us to talk about next year. We'll check in with you later, bud. Thank you so much for joining us.